think it means that should it be more specific?
No, I think it means that should the praise be measured?
I think it should be both of those things, yeah? I think you should have clear criteria in your own mind at what point you start to, you know, for one child, it might be a huge effort to sit still for a while, yeah? And I had, when I was teaching in a secondary school, and I remember this autistic child, or bordering on the sort of autistic spectrum, and he'd constantly get up. He couldn't help it, yeah? That just what was it. And at the beginning I wasn't aware of it, and he kept disrupting and running around, and I was surprised the kids next to him, they were, you know, that's what he does, you know, it's okay, yeah? They still got on with it. And you know, for him, sitting down for a few minutes, you know, praise was an appropriate response to that achievement. Yeah? For other children, you know, they need to have done something quite different. So having clear criteria, I think, is important. But then also, I think it's the sort of spectrum about what does praise mean. Yeah? Is it sort of a meaningless, generic, well done sort of thing, or is it specific? Is it focused, and so forth? And I think it requires those. Did you have your hand up earlier? Yes. Yeah.
You have to be very careful with praise, because you can put the student into a kind of a false self-esteem. They may think that he's good, actually he's not good because of all his praises.
Yep.
So you have to be very careful.
That's why I think the criteria are so important. Yeah.
Praising always stimulates students, I think.
You think, yeah?
I think
Yeah.
children need that.
Yeah.
Especially the younger
Yeah.
children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone needs appreciation.
It sort of puts you know,
Yeah.
pushes you up to, you know.
Yeah, sure, but I agree with that. But I've also seen examples of praise becoming meaningless because it's just showered on the class, where the teachers doing it so automatically that it's the same way they say shh, shh, shush. Yeah? It's just another way of the opposite of that. So I'd encourage you to think when you give praise. Why am I giving praise now? What's the and if
it's because they have given the correct answer or something beyond. What is it?
Yeah. Okay, they've given a correct answer, but you remember this challenging learning task? Is it something, you know, they were able to do 2 weeks ago already, and now it's coming up again, so they give the correct answer? Should, you know?
It should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, yeah. I think it's important to think about, to be clear in your own mind, and you're the best judge of that because you know the children. Yeah.
No, of course you don't go, oh, well done, well done.
Yeah. And then what else do we have here? Encourage interaction and dialogue around learning, facilitate the development of self-assessment and reflection in learning, give learners choice in assessment, content and process. That's an interesting thing as well. That relates back to this whole idea of the learning partnership, and that relates back to the interaction. Have any of you ever done that? Yeah? Can you give an example of what that might look like? Could you give an example of what that might look like in your context, giving choice?
I give them choice at the time of presentation.
Yeah?
Because everyone is not a good speaker.
Yeah?
So, but someone who is good for searching relevant material,
Yes.
comparing or making illustrations.
Yes.
So I can assign tasks according
Yes.
to their
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
For group.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So the topic is Venn diagram. I've explained
Yes.
to them, and then I'll give them the subject choices.
Yeah.
Subject of your choice and apply Venn diagram.
Yes, yeah. So bringing in some sort of differentiation there, yeah. So we've got some involve students in decision making about assessment policy and practice. Yes,
What I'm not clear about is we should involve students in asking them that on what thing or how we are going to assess them. The 8th point involves students in decision making and about assessment policy. Should we be asking them, how do you want us to assess you?
well,
Because what I believe is that assessment is basically for the teachers to know whether she was able to achieve her objective?
Well, there is different types of assessment. One reason for assessing clearly is to provide you information to make judgments about whether or not they've learned. But I think it's equally important for the assessment to provide information for learners to enable them to understand, as we said earlier on, where they have to go. And they might well have some ideas about, I mean, what might make assessment processes more effective than not. It's basically this business about entering into a conversation and dialogue with learners about the ways in which learning is organized. At the end of the day, you won't get round the fact that measures or judgments will have to be made about whether or not they reach certain standards. And what this is not saying, let's try and do away with that, but it's trying to say, let's get pupils more involved in understanding the reasons and the processes and input some, yes, yes, yeah, yeah, and then make a contribution to that. Support the development of learning communities and help teachers adapt teaching to student needs. So those would be some principles of assessment that you might go away with and think about and have a look like. So key questions in terms of feedback now, very quickly. Effective feedback must answer the following 3 questions. Where am I going? What are the goals? How am I going? What processes are being made towards the goal? And where to next? So this thing about well done doesn't really help me in these sorts of ways. Yeah? It doesn't really tell me what the goals are. It doesn't really tell me what progress I've made towards the goals, and it doesn't really tell me what I have to do in order to move forward. So that's why assessment is such a time-consuming process, and giving feedback, because it needs to attend to all these sorts of things. And what type of feedback is there? Well, I can give feedback in order to verify response accuracy. Yeah, this was correct, this was incorrect. Yeah? To give explanation of the correct answers. This would be the correct answer and this is why. To give them hints. So the student says something and you give a hint if they don't really know how to answer it. Topic contingent, to make sure that it focuses on the topic in hand. Response contingent, so it focuses on what the learner has said, not the topic that they're trying to address. To attribute isolation, to identify certain aspects that they're not doing well in. To give worked examples. And to provide partial solutions. So it can take a whole range of types, and it's difficult to make the right sort of decision. Yep.
If you may put some more light on attribute isolation.
Yeah, so you've got your essay, yeah, that you talked about, and isolation would be, in this essay I was actually looking particularly at the way in which my students were able to use metaphor. Yeah? And so this is the way in which I focus in my assessment. Yeah? I might say 1 or 2 things about what else is going on, yeah? But I really focus in on the use of metaphor, and that's what I give feedback about. Yeah? So that's how and the student needs to understand that. So if your feedback then just talks about metaphor, so how do they interpret that? Do they think, you know, this has been, the rest has been brilliant, where you haven't really said very much about the rest because...
I mentioned you have used a very good example of descriptive.
Yes, yeah, yes, yeah.
So the other student then said, why was that?
Yeah.
So this is how we have to...
Yeah, and many tasks, unless they're really sort of yes and no type questions or multiple choice questions, have an element of complexity, and you know, you will invariably focus in on particular aspects, but the learner needs to know that in order then to be able to do the right thing with the feedback that you give. Yeah. And here, to finish off I come to portfolios, don't worry about it. Yeah? What does the literature say about feedback? Yeah? Forget about the thing on the right, we haven't got time to look at that. Just look at the bits at the left. Focus feedback on the task, not the learner. That's what the research says. Yeah? Don't say you've been lazy, yeah? But talk about the task. Yeah? Not the characteristics of the learner, but the characteristics of the task. Provide elaborated feedback to enhance learning. Describe the what, how, and why of a given problem. Present elaborated feedback in manageable units. Just imagine you had the time and sit there for half an hour and write 2 pages about how well the student had done on the essay. The chances are after the 4th, 5th line they switch off and do something else. Yeah? You have to make a judgment and say, in this essay, this is really the one thing that I want the students now to attend to. Yeah? And that's manageable for them, they can take that away. And, you know, so you haven't sort of failed in your task as a teacher if you just do the thing. What you actually do, research suggests, is you help the learner. You help the learner focus, and you help the learner attend to what's important. And you clearly, your professional judgment comes in, knowing exactly where in the cycle the student, you are, where the student is, so what he or she now needs specifically, out of all the things you could tell them, to make a leap forward. And then be specific and clear with feedback message. And if it's not, you can impede learning and can frustrate learners. If possible, try to link feedback clearly and specifically to goals and performance. Or do what it says here, give examples. Yeah? Say this thing particular in the text. Yeah? And that's a tricky thing. When we have students who do dissertations at master's level, we give them an opportunity to provide drafts, and we then comment on the drafts. Now, I could go through those drafts and annotate everything and all of that, every specific instance, and what would the students do? They would look at these things, put them right, and then hand it in again. So, but given that what I'm trying to achieve here is criticality, is engagement, is personal reflection, is individual thinking, it's not particularly helpful if I tell them exactly what I want them to do, they do it, and then, what I ask is questions to them. Is say, have you actually ask them questions so they can go back to what they've done and then think about what they've done and think, okay, do I want to change